On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Timm Peddie. We're going to be talking about not getting the right results from Gen AI. We're going to ask Timm what that actually means. What are those right results? What is operationalizing Gen AI? What's missing? We're also going to talk about finding the right problem to drive, and also what happens when you don't get those results. We're going to talk about the value and some of the cost and the implications. Actually, we'll see how far we can get. Hopefully we can get a few more minutes with Timm, but I do appreciate you taking the time, Timm. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to be here and talk through these interesting topics.
Absolutely. All right. So at the top, I know you mentioned not getting the right results from Gen AI. So that alone is probably multiple questions, but let's actually start at the top. Gen AI, operationalizing that, just to make sure we're using the same definition. What does operationalizing Gen AI mean?
I think when people and specifically companies look at Gen AI, they think of ChatGPT lately, unless they've been in the industry for a while. They think of consuming existing technologies. As companies jump into that, it's not as easy as just pulling some APIs and rolling it out. There are a lot of workflows and processes that really need to be developed for anything that's generative, meaning that with the same input, it could have a different output over time. With the idea of drift or hallucinations or other topics that people use, there are just a lot of things you need to put through from a process and people perspective, thinking through roles and responsibilities, thinking through costs, thinking through other big topics before we can really realize it and gain the benefits from it.
You mentioned not getting the right results from Gen AI. That to me, obviously you touched on hallucinations. There's a couple other factors we could talk about. When we want to define the right results, how do we define that? And the reason I'm asking that is, as you said, when we go to ChatGPT, a lot of people at this point have exposure to some form of LLM that they put something in and get a response back. That one response, a lot of times we're like, okay, I'm just going to go with it because it's sometimes trivial in nature. When we go to our favorite search engine and we type something in search, we will go through pages to understand the truth. We won't stop at page 1. Sometimes we'll be at page 8 still looking for the truth. In this case, when we're talking about the right results, what does that mean? Can you kind of talk to us about what right means in this case?
That is a great question, because I think part of it is who is defining it and who is policing it and who is curating it. And that's one of the complexities that I think a lot of organizations have, is a lot of people, when they think Gen AI, they think it's just something you can roll out and it'll just learn by itself by definition. And it's not quite that way. So one of the best analogies of, I would say, an average Gen AI is driving a car in reverse. So as long as the road is straight or you're going slowly, it's easy to do. But as soon as you start throwing some curves in there or you start driving a little bit faster, your ability to respond to what's in front of you is directly correlates with how quickly you can get accurate information and looking through the rearview mirror. And so what it does is that for a lot of organizations, there are processes for, say, updating a model, or even putting something into a new CI/CD pipeline to publish a new model, or how are they leveraging a model or making changes to it. A lot of organizations, that can be 6 weeks, a month, 3 weeks. And so to really respond in an agile way that you can in this new world is you've got to create processes that allow for near real-time processing of information and acting upon that very quickly. And a lot of organizations don't know this yet, or are slow to do it, or think that somehow they won't need to do it, and that things will just work out. But for example, you can have existing proven models where you could have, an accuracy and precision that's off the charts. It could be 98, 99% accurate. You take the exact same model, you take the exact same content, you roll it out to a new customer, and it doesn't perform the same way. There's no reason why it shouldn't perform the same way. But I've yet to see a use case where it performs as good of or better than where you were actually pulling it from. And so what that does is, it creates processes, it creates issues that a lot of organizations just aren't mature enough to face it, right now.
You said something very interesting, and I want to maybe follow up on it. When we're taking, a lot of companies, I heard 2024 is the year of the POC. Obviously, I don't think that's a general statement for everybody, but it seemed like a lot of people were testing the concept, finding low-hanging fruit. As you kind of are to look forward and go, okay, well, people were testing, they're picking the low-hanging fruit. A lot of times there were chatbots, easy thing to pick. As you want to scale and find more complex problems to solve, how much learnings transfer from some of those more rudimentary POCs that still take 6 to 9 months, mind you? Not that they're a quick solution. They still take time and effort and money and budget. How do those translate into bigger projects? And obviously with the mindset that we're still looking for the right results.
That's a good question. I mean, I think in looking at some of these smaller projects, I think they are critical in the success of the larger ones. And the reason why they're critical is in going through them, you're actually learning some of these processes where you'll need to become adept as you get into more complex solutioning. And so as you think of some of the models that are out there, yes, you can pull in a variety of open source models and there are new ones every day. But in terms of how you leverage them and how you use them, that changes. And just because there's no recipe to get the exact product. So again, like I was saying before, you can do the exact same thing that someone else is doing and come up with a different result in a lot of cases. And so what this does is it allows you to go through the processes you need to create those mature solutions. And what a lot of times what that means is it means rapid failure. So as you're going through the solutioning of it, as you're trying these different ways of getting creative results, you'll really find things that fail and things that are successful. One of the ways I think you can be successful is creating ways to just fail as quickly as you can, put those out. So you're always kind of innovating, you're always trying new things. One of the things with generative too is it's never static. There's always a drift one direction or another. So you're either improving or you're getting worse. I have yet to see like a pure flat line. It's always in transition. And so you need to develop, again, those processes that can address it very quickly.
If you were to, I guess, have a clean slate, which obviously not everyone has the luxury, but if you could articulate what is a good starting project, what are the characteristics that if somebody were to go on to create a POC, you'd want to see some of those attributes so that give yourself the best chance for success?
You know, I think one that I like, just because so many people are familiar with ChatGPT and just what that offers. So you've got a chatbot, you've got search, you've got kind of text content creation. What I would actually recommend to companies, and I just saw an RFP for something similar, but doing a vector-based solution based upon a pre-qualified knowledge base. So rather than even doing anything with generative, I would propose that some of these companies actually take existing documents that they have, they leverage the semantic structures from a language model. You can license them for a fraction of the cost for a generative solution. It's very easy to do. You load those, documents, websites, PDFs, files, other things into that you want to use to kind of pre-codify the solutions, and you limit the output based upon that digestive knowledge base that you create. What that does is it allows companies to minimize the risk to put something out there. It also allows them to kind of create the processes in a very incremental way for something like policing the results. You can go through, you can create, an audit log to go through and take a percentage of them, or to just proactively look at some of the results, see if it's giving you the desired responses. If it's not, you can think about how you want to update the documents. You can do it in an offline way. It doesn't have to be real time. You can get into it very incrementally. And then if you need to make an update, you can make an update based upon your existing processes. And it's really kind of a low risk way because everything is kind of done in advance. It's kind of like the waterfall way of hitting generative AI. And I think it's a great way for companies to kind of put their toes into it. And then also too, I think I mentioned this when we were discussing before, but I was looking for a car. And I was trying to find a car, and I went to a manufacturer's website. They had a chat in there. I started asking it questions about, horsepower and models. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, they've got all the right answers. They've got all the information I want. I took the horsepower, I took the model number, and I went down to the dealership, and I'm like, man, I want to buy this car. And in talking to the guy, I found out that the car didn't exist. Like, I don't know what was going on, but the model was pulling information from the wrong places, and it basically created the wrong information. And here I was super excited, but this is in production on a major automaker's website, and they're just giving out false information to all their consumers. So that's what this mitigates.
Yeah, that derivative data when it's not right is obviously, that's a great use case of data that is synthetic and not real. And, as you were talking, and I've thought about this, and I was going to bounce it off you, and I don't know if it'll help people out there, but I know there are a lot of companies, especially bigger ones, that have HR handbooks. All right, they're supposed to read it, but no one really reads it. Let's just be honest. I was like, what a great big document to put against an LLM and be like, hey, listen, ask these questions. Don't email us. You got this. And I was like, maybe it's low-hanging fruit as a chatbot, but it kind of fits everything you said. I was like, you know what? Maybe that would be an interesting starting point and help the HR team that normally doesn't get a lot of the new stuff anyways first.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think if you wanted to migrate a little bit one step past the vector-based, I think the other thing is what you're proposing is do it for internal use or internal consumption. So there are a lot of assist type services that you could do just for your own employees or internal users that allow you to get into it that kind of minimize that exposure and minimize the risk.
Absolutely. You touched on cost. I know when we were first speaking, you obviously mentioned the big players out there, the big tech companies. They have invested billions and billions of dollars to set up a service. They're trying to drive down price. Companies that are trying to use LLMs, they're trying to implement Gen AI. How should they be thinking about cost, right? And obviously, they're not probably. I'm hoping they're not building out their own infrastructures. They're using a service. I'm assuming that's where we're talking about. But when we're thinking about costs and we're thinking about value, talk to us a little bit about how those two impact some of these getting the right results conversation.
Yeah, no, it's definitely I think an area where some deep decisioning and understanding will merit as you look through some of these big solution providers. A lot of them have been doing this for years. So all these solutions kind of pre-exist. The reason why ChatGPT popped them out is they were the first ones to brave, training it on the open internet. But the solutions have existed for many years before. When you think through, some of the big box providers, they've got very mature cost structures. They've found ways of charging you repeatedly for similar services, whether it be, hosting, whether it be some type of CPU-based, cost, whether it be data transfers. You could have literally 40 different line items in your monthly bill for just doing something that you think is AI, but all the other costs that are loaded onto it. You can get a big surprise. And then as soon as you start doing your own models and you think through, okay, I'm going to train my own models. This is what I want to do. And if I'm going to use some type of cloud-based service, you can get hit with huge bills on a monthly basis and you can get really surprised. In one day, you can spend what a lot of people would spend in a month.
Absolutely. When you're looking at getting this right solution out, you'd mentioned the ground truth and having a baseline. As the tech team, engineering team is developing, they're getting testing. Talk to us a little bit about those checks and balances. And you mentioned that was obviously it's drifting one way or the other, every model. But there needs to be some kind of confidence by the end user for adoption. Because obviously if they're thinking, well, this answer, it might not be right based on my finger in the air experience, they might not use it. We want them to use it. How do we aid in adoption when it comes to making sure things look right?
Yeah, no, I think it requires an audit. I think there are ways to automate it. So I think you can actually use AI to police the AI, but somewhere along the way, you've got to have humans in the loop. And so as you're thinking through of what is correct, what is right, what is the proper answer, you have to have some baseline. I actually had a conversation earlier today where the assumption is just automatically use the AI as the assumption. But the AI has to start somewhere. So if you think of a little kid, and that's the AI, if you don't give it rules, you're going to basically, turn into chaos pretty quickly. And so that's the whole idea is I think it's important to have humans in the loop, and that takes effort. And there's no real shortcut to it. So somewhere in the way, you're either going to pay someone to do it, and you're going to get some service that has already provided that, or you're going to do it yourself. And I would propose that there are advantages to both, depending on where you are in kind of the curve and the cycle and what the topic is. But it's got to be there somewhere. And then as it matures, as you understand more about kind of what the barriers are and the side rails, then I think you can mature it and maybe get to a point where you can try and automate it. That is definitely plausible. Actually submitted a patent on just that topic. But I think there's a lot of work that needs to go into it before you can get there.
As you kind of see the initiatives around Gen AI, are there any common pitfalls? Are there common mistakes that you see? And it could be from a more technical perspective where they're the limitations of actually getting to successful product release.
The limitations and the problems that I see people kind of stumbling over repeatedly are the time to market. So they don't understand the complexity that's necessarily there. And so people think, hey, we've got AI. Like, we just integrated with this API, we've got this service set up, we're going to be rolling out things in a few months. Yes, you might be able to, but it might be with a 60% or 80% like accuracy and precision. But as you want to get to something like, when we think of software, like a lot of people think of 5.9 availability. When you think of like service level guarantees and stuff like that, you've got 99.8 maybe. You'd be hard pressed to find anything in AI like the big box providers. Again, if you provide their service, they don't provide SLAs. And so, yes, you might be able to pay for an 80%, but when you think of a user going in, if 20% of it, the propensity that might be wrong, 20%, that's horrible. And so as we think through what those SLAs are and what the accuracy is, I mean, there's still like a curve between really making it mainstream, and companies are doing it. They're being successful, but they've been doing it for years and they've got a mature organization to support it.
I guess, we've been hearing for the last 18 months, obviously ChatGPT has fueled this explosion, the conversation, the awareness, which is great. In terms of the expectation, and maybe we can answer this just from the business perspective, what should the realistic expectation for an enterprise be? And the reason I'm asking that is we're talking a lot about trying to find the right problem to solve. We're trying to mitigate some of these issues, the adoption. You just mentioned, finding something that is above 80% accurate. I mean, there's a lot of things that we have to overcome to actually get to a point where larger parts of the company can start using and building solutions to help them. Are we looking at just what kind of curve are we looking at? 18 months and things accelerate? Is this it's just per company thing? Each company is going to start learning, or will some of these models start being built that are going to be a little bit more off the shelf, more commoditized, and you tweak? What do you think happens so that more solutions can actually be put into play?
I think we'll definitely see more open sourced tools allowing us to get to development more quickly. I think a lot of the language model based technologies are becoming more mature. And so that would be, different types of search, different types of assist products, different types of chat products, different types of content creation and, content generation tools. I think those are becoming more mainstream now, but they still require that same, policing, validation, and some type of CI/CD update process for improving it. But I think companies are getting more mature in that. For a lot of these organizations, too, to go back to your point earlier, there are internal use cases where maybe 80% is good enough. If you can help a caller that's doing maybe a sales call or doing a support call or something like that and providing them insights to help them improve, maybe it doesn't need to be perfect. If you can give them a call summary every day, or give an agent or make recommendations, maybe it doesn't have to be perfect, and just having those insights and those notes, like a Cliff Notes, is more than good enough. And it can save, in some cases, millions of dollars per year, or help you convert.
I quite like that. I guess, as you were mentioning, and you're speaking of that, I was thinking about competitive advantage, and companies are using LLMs. You mentioned they're going to be open source. Where are they coming from? I actually going to make a very crude analogy, but it's maybe one that does fit. And I guess if I follow the Tour de France, I like watching cycling. I'm not a cyclist, but I like watching it. Lance Armstrong got stripped of all his Tour de France's. They could not give out some of those because the next several riders were all also convicted of doping and cheating within the sport. They're just vacated titles. When it comes to Gen AI, if we're starting to leverage models that exist out there, where does the competitive advantage come? If we're kind of handicapping that everyone's going to have access to these language models, these large language models, where does that competitive edge come from? Is it the business process? Is it the data? Where does that kind of end up being for a company?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know if you know, but I used to be teammates with Lance. But,
oh, no way. I did not know that. Now I'm just like, I'm going to geek out over that fact.
Yeah, actually, I created the U.S. Olympic Committee, like anti-drug committee. So I was a part of a 4-person review board, which is kind of
small world to draw that analogy of all sports or all analogies I bring
exactly.
up. That's kind of cool.
But I think it's going to be early adopters. So I think there's still a window now where I think people can gain competitive advantage of it by being an early adopter, but very quickly it's going to become table stakes. And so as people, like I've seen some business cases that build out like a 7-year forecast, I'm like, in 7 years, there is like these advantages aren't going to be there. It's going to be parity. And so you're going to need not only this, but a lot more just to survive. But if you don't tip your toe in the water right now, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do it tomorrow. And so what's funny too is a lot of companies think of like AI as like a thing. They're like the AI team or the AI person or the AI project. AI is going to be in every piece of the business. If AI isn't a part of every breath, I mean, it's going to be difficult to survive, I think, in the future.
Interesting. I definitely think, as we see companies start understanding how to leverage this, and you mentioned it's table stakes, I think there's an art component to this that's going to come out where people will just understand. And I think it may be what you mentioned is having done it sooner, having stumbled earlier, and having seen what not to do versus thinking, you know what, in 3-4 years, if I'm going to start with this, you're already going to be behind that curve. So I love it. I love the examples. Timm, I want to thank you for coming on the show. I know we did not exhaust the topic. I'm sure there's plenty more left. If somebody did want to reach out to you, did want to maybe pick your brain on operationalizing Gen AI, what is a good way of getting in touch with you?
Yeah, I'd probably say the easiest way is just reach out to me on LinkedIn. So I am www.linkedin.com/Peddie.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. And I'm going to have to go Google you and see more about your cycling background because I'm kind of excited. So thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, Amir, I appreciate the time and appreciate the conversations and great speaking with you.
Absolutely. All right, that's it for this episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, 2 things. One, I think operationalizing Gen AI was an interesting topic when Timm and I were chatting about it and kind of the bullets of what we wanted to walk through. I was like, this is going to be valuable to everyone, talking about what it is, finding that right product, the value, and some of these various components that people are still trying to learn and go through. And I think Timm provides some great examples, great insights in terms of how he approaches this problem space. So please share this with somebody else who might find it useful. Also, subscribe, comment, let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.